a passage, if you will, in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, where Paul, who is one of the early leaders of the church, is writing to a church that he knows and he loves, but a church that's gone a little bit astray. Okay, so they've got some slightly weird beliefs going on. There's kind of some ethical issues. So they're doing all kinds of weird things in their relationships that he's going to challenge with love. He's going to challenge it. And lots of things going on in terms of their church practice. And then we get to chapter 15, and Paul challenges the most important issue of them all, which is that some of them in this church in the first century, or at this point he's writing the 30th year after Jesus' death, this church has started to not believe that Jesus rose from the dead. And Paul is having none of it. Okay, so we're going to look at his claim here. Why are we doing that? The eagle-eyed and eagle-eared amongst you will notice that we've actually preached on this passage in the last couple of years. But we're coming back to it because it is the earliest attestation and testimony of the resurrection of Jesus. As I've said already, scholars believe it was written about 35 years after the death of Jesus. And when you're doing historical study, you're looking at the historicity of something, when a source is really close to the event, that's a good thing. Okay, so it's going to help us as we look at it. Perhaps 30 years seems like a long time to you. It certainly does to me, because I'm not even 30 yet. I know, I am so much still in my 20s, that I've got at least 6 months left. So some of you, maybe you were around 30 years ago and you tell me some events that happened, I'd have to take your word for it because I wasn't there, okay? 1995 is a mystery to me. And so I had a look at some events in 1995, and most of them were either too kind of sordid or sad to bring up, but it was the first time we had a World Book Day. Okay. And it was also the moment where the legislation was passed that allowed pubs to open since Sunday afternoons. And that is a difficult thing for me to even believe, that there was a time in our nation where we allowed pubs not to open on Sunday afternoons, that we so made it the holy day. And so maybe I wouldn't believe it, but if you were there and you told me, I'd believe you. 30 years is not actually that long. In fact, it's even more powerful a testimony than that, this story, this particular thing that Paul is saying in 1 Corinthians 15, because scholars believe that his creed, the thing we're about to hear read to us, his statement of the beliefs of Christianity, finds its source much earlier than that. Even dating all the way back to the first couple of years after Jesus' death. And it's believed that Paul got this creed from the church in Galatia. And so he's reporting something that Christians have believed since the very first days. One historian, James Dunn, really influential scholar at Durham University, I believe he's passed away now. He said months of Jesus' death. And so when Paul says that this is of first importance, he really means it. This is what Christians have believed since day one. If you put your faith in Jesus, you believe he rose from the dead. And so it's important for us to look at it and to unpack it together. Both if you're new to church, if you're asking questions about Christianity, this is of first importance. Paul says if this isn't true, you should pity Christians above all other people. And this is right at the centre of what we believe. And this is good news for you if you're already a Christian as well. This is still, I believe, the news you most need to hear in your life today. So let's hear this read to us, and then we will unpack it together.
To you as I've received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12. Then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. Last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared also to me. For I am the least of the apostles, unworthy to be called an apostle because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God I am what I am, and his grace toward me was not in vain. On the contrary, I worked harder than any of them, though it was not I, but the grace of God that is with me. Whether then it was I or they, so we preach, and so you believed.
If you've spent any time looking at debates over the reality of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, you'll realise that a lot of the arguments come down to why the tomb was empty on that day. on Easter Sunday. And that's because a lot of the other historical facts are just kind of accepted generally. The historian Tom Holland, not Spider-Man, but the one who wrote Dominion, this wonderful kind of history of Christianity, he said, no credible historian thinks Jesus didn't exist. That's just accepted. You can find all kinds of things on the internet. Find people that believe the royal family are lizards and that kind of thing. So I'm sure you can find someone that says he didn't. But in terms of scholarly work, historical work, Jesus was a real guy who really walked on this earth. Another thing that's accepted is that he died on the cross. This is something that historians generally agree with, and that he was buried as well. A skeptical scholar by the name of John Dominic Crossan, he's a New Testament scholar and the history of early Christianity. He's critical, and he would read this in a way that we wouldn't. But even he would say, Jesus' death by crucifixion under Pontius Pilate is as sure as anything historical can ever be. It just happened. And he would cite ancient sources outside of the Bible, names which always come up. You've done the Alpha course and you study this stuff. People like Tacitus and Josephus, historians outside of the Christian kind of faith and the biblical canon, who would attest to Jesus' death on the cross. And if you know the name Josephus, you know he's one of the sources that always comes up, because he writes quite early, later than 1 Corinthians, but he writes about kind of 93, 94 years after Jesus' death. And you'll know also that his testimony tends to be a bit kind of challenged. People say, I think Christians are added that later on, and so it's not as kind of weighty. You can't really understand, but that's what he thought, and that's what he wrote. There's actually a new book out called Josephus and Jesus, if you're interested in this stuff, by a guy called F.C. Schmidt, and he would say that his really remarkable testimony as to who Jesus was and what he did is actually mostly what Josephus actually wrote. Okay, so even critical scholars are recognizing that, okay, this guy really lived, he really died, and he was really buried. And then all of the early sources agree as well that the tomb was empty. All of the ones that you can find in the Bible and elsewhere, okay, he wasn't there. He wasn't there. And perhaps the most weighty evidence for this is the fact that neither the Romans nor the Jewish authorities that would have had every reason to try and squash the Christian cult the moment it started never wheeled out his body and said, hey, here he is. He didn't rise. We'd never have had 2,000 years of church history if that happened, but it couldn't happen because he wasn't there. And so here we are. We have to debate these facts, these things that are agreed upon, and we get to the point of the empty tomb, and we've got to kind of deal with that. How do we answer that question? And in fact, there's something else that people can't deny, which is that the disciples of Jesus really believed, they had experiences that made them genuinely, to the core of who they were, believe that they met him after he rose from the dead. That he was really raised. And that's what Paul is testifying to in our passage today. He said he appeared to Cephas, which is another name for the Apostle Peter, then to the 12, then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep, and then he appeared to James, and then to all the apostles. Aside from including the names cited here, in the New Testament you can find 16 names of people who really say yes. They're names, people who met Jesus and saw him after he was risen from the dead. And also there's huge groups as well. It's like a group of 500 people that saw him after he rose from the dead. And whatever you think happened there, no one debates that they really believed he rose from the dead. And all these guys went to their death believing it, for believing it, and for proclaiming it. Another thing that historically just adds weight to it is the kind of witnesses that the early Christians cite are not the ones you would choose if you were making something up. People like Peter, who's the first on this list from Paul, is just constantly shown to be a bit of an idiot, putting his foot in his mouth. He betrays Jesus right at the last moments of his life, and Paul says, yeah, he saw him. You wouldn't choose it necessarily. You're making something up. Okay, this is a fact. We've got to prove. To start our new religion, you wouldn't choose Peter as the guy you put at the top of your list. But he really saw him. It really happened. It kind of slightly, in a reverse way, makes it more likely that this testimony is true. Also, famously, some of the first people that were women. And in the first century, you could not trust. The Romans thought you couldn't trust the testimony of women. And if you were in a court and you had a woman there giving her version of events, it wouldn't be given any weight at all because of the sexism of that time. And so you wouldn't choose to cite that Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Joanna were there at the tomb and saw the empty tomb. You wouldn't say that unless it really happened. Unless that's actually what they believed that they saw. And so, what you have is a load of agreed facts and then a question mark. What happened? Why was the tomb empty? And you can go down a bit of a rabbit hole of all the different ideas. People say all kinds of different things, like someone stole the body of Jesus. Yeah, okay, grave robberies happened. Guess they stole his body, maybe they did that, but then how do you then answer the fact that many people say they saw him? You say, okay, well, it's hallucinations. Obviously very sad, and it's grief-induced hallucinations. People see ghosts and stuff, right? And they're not really there, so it's probably just because they were really sad. Okay, but all the apostles, 500 people at once, having the same hallucination of the same guy? You can't, when you're doing historical study, prove something like you might do in a test tube for science. Okay, we don't have a time machine. I can't hop in the TARDIS and go back to Easter Sunday and watch Jesus come out of the grave, as I believe I would see. I can't do that. But what we are doing is just looking at the evidence and stacking it up and looking at probabilities and trying to figure out, okay, when it comes to actually answering the question, is it more likely that loads of people had the same grief-induced hallucination at the same time, and also someone happened to have stolen the body at exactly the right time? Is it more likely that that happened, or that he actually rose from the dead? If you are of a kind of atheistic, materialistic background, you would say, well, it doesn't matter how ridiculous the other option is, I'm never going to believe the miracle, because they don't happen. Materialistic, like there's only matter, there's only stuff, there's nothing supernatural about the world. I'd love to just push back on that for a moment, if you're able just to challenge that belief a little bit. G.K. Chesterton, who was a writer in the 20th century, he debated the idea of materialism in his book called Orthodoxy like this. He said, imagine you've got someone who is completely convinced, wrongly, that they are the heir to the British throne. Okay, and he uses some non-PC words to describe someone like this, because it's written in the early 20th century. And they're completely convinced of this utter lie, and they've got to be incarcerated because it's like danger to themselves and to others. He said, imagine that you go to them in the place that they are and try to convince them that they're not the King of England, okay? They are not going to be the King of England. And they are convinced that they are, and there's a big conspiracy, okay, out there to stop them ascending to the throne. What's going to happen? Everything you say is going to fit within their story. Because you say, no, you're not going to be the King of England, you're just a bit confused. And then that guy will say, of course you'd say that if I was going to be the King of England, and you were out to get me and stop me ascending to the throne. It's happened in history, right? The princes in the tower and things like that. It happens. Maybe it's happening to me. And Chesterton says it's a bit like that, the materialistic worldview, because what you find is he said, it's like it covers everything. You can answer any question that comes at you. Yeah. I know it sounds more likely that Jesus rose from the dead, but only material answer will do. It feels like it covers everything. He said, at the same time, it covers nothing. That guy's confused idea of the world feels like it covers every question that can come at him, but it doesn't answer any of the phenomena really that's facing him. And it's the same thing if you hold to, that's what Chesterton is saying, it's the same thing if you hold to there's only molecules and stuff and matter. Because it feels like it covers everything, but it doesn't really cover anything. There's so much about our lives and the way that we live and what we believe and love and beauty and human rights and all kinds of different things that you think, actually, we don't live like material things are all there is. This understanding, this way of painting the world doesn't really cover anything. And so, if that is where you're at, if there was ever a miracle to believe in, I could just get one in through that barrier that you've put up, it would be this one. For all the reasons we've said, all of the evidence that we've mentioned, and the fact that if someone really rose from the dead, what would you expect? You'd expect that people would tell other people about it. They'd build a religion on it. You'd expect thousands of years later for almost 30-year-olds to be standing up and proclaiming that he really did rise from the dead. That's what you'd expect. And that's what we have. Billions of people claim the name of Christ in this world today because it really happened. It really did. If you have more questions on that, I've had to rattle through a whole load of stuff there, please to help you. But the question that still remains to us is, so what? What does it change? If he really did rise from the dead, why does that really matter to me? And actually some of you, even if you're not Christians, are probably switched off at this point, because I think in cities like ours, a lot of people would say, yeah, I'm spiritual, I believe in miracles, and cool, maybe he did rise from the dead, but so what? I believe in all kinds of things. What's of first importance about this? And if you are someone who believes in Jesus today, I'd imagine that kind of use of manuscripts and historical data is not what really convinced you, that Jesus really rose from the dead. And you need to hear why it matters for your soul again today. So we're going to look at that. The author, Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings, wrote a wonderful essay called On Fairy Stories, where he debates the reason that all throughout human history we come up with these myths and legends, and anywhere people can write or imagine, we've done that. And he asks the question as to why is that? And he starts to see in his kind of survey of these different myths and legends some themes that come back time and time and time again. Themes like a desperate need for there to be something magic, supernatural about the world. There has to be something more. He speaks of a need to escape from the kind of difficulties of our world, to escape from the inevitability of time moving us towards death. And in fact, he says escape from death is always part of these stories, right? You think of Lord of the Rings, it's like immortal elves and the undying lands, and it's like there's always this kind of aspect to it. And he says it's because that is what our hearts most deeply want. That's what we ache for, and so we come up with these stories to help us. And hey, we're not so different in the 21st century, are we? It's fantasy novels that fly off the shelves the fastest. Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of role-playing game that was meant to be, or initially was for kind of nerds in basements. Millions of people watch that online now. You go on YouTube, look for it. People just glued to the screen as people kind of roll dice and say, yes, my bow was super powerful and it had won this. People, we are desperate to kind of escape our reality into these fantasy worlds. Even artificial intelligence, which is a technology, right? It's like algorithms. And just asking ChatGPT if this bowl is really bad or something, that's what it is. But what happens is that people start to do a mythology around it. You notice this? People talk about like AI gods, start to say, oh, we're going to bow down to them one day. Or they start saying, AI is going to solve all of our problems. It's going to solve every medical issue. It's going to mean that we live forever. And suddenly we're back to deathlessness, and this myth has erupted even around technology. We're not so different to those that came up with these fairy stories from years ago. We're not so different to Tolkien. All of us ache for these things. And in the last paragraph of his wonderful essay, you should read it, there's loads of interesting things in there. Tolkien, who was a Christian, said this. He said, this story, the story of Jesus, is supreme and it is true. He said, in the story of Jesus, history and legend meet together. And all of the things that we most deeply ache for and kind of fantasize about and escape into these worlds that aren't really real, all of these things, it's like, yeah, there's a myth that's true, that really happened. That's why the historical stuff matters, even if you're bored by talk of like Josephus or whatever. It matters that it really happened, because the thing that you most deeply desire happened in history. Jesus demonstrates, as he rises from the dead, deathlessness, a defeat of death. He demonstrates that there's something more than material stuff that's going on, something more powerful than the aches and pains and evils that you experience every day. He demonstrates it. He demonstrates that the world is more than just stuff. And he escapes, right, from his awful suffering into this new perfect life, where he's got this new body, and then he ascends into heaven. Jesus demonstrates all that we most deeply want, and that changes everything. Seeing the risen Jesus changes everything. That's the story of Paul here. He mostly says kind of, yeah, all these other people witnessed Jesus, and I had a different kind of experience. He said, last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared also to me. For I am the least of the apostles, unworthy to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God, I am what I am. And his grace toward me was not in vain. You can read about Paul's conversion in the book of Acts. It's like, yeah, these guys saw him, so did I. It was different. It's like, he knocked me off my horse. It's just a wonderful vision of Jesus, and it changed everything. I went from hating Christians and hating the church to building the church, writing parts of the Bible. What a story. And that's the story of the Christians in this room, isn't it? You're not convinced by manuscripts. You're convinced because you met the risen Jesus, spiritually speaking. That's my story. It changed my life. Okay, I really know him, and it's so unattainable if you've not had it yourself. I get that. I get that it feels mysterious and far off until it happens to you. Until you have that moment that Paul has. You say, yeah, these guys physically saw him, that's wonderful and it matters, but I've seen him too. And I can say I've seen him too, and many in this room can say that as well, and it changes everything. One of my heroes, pastor, preacher, teacher, and a man I probably quote a bit too much in my sermons. There's a video of him going around that's viral at the moment. I don't know if you've seen it on your feeds, where he, in the kind of last part of his life, really, is on a podcast, and he's speaking about the pain of his. He knows it's close to the end. The pain of what that loss will mean for him and his wife and his family. And he comes out with this line. He's kind of facing death. He said this: "If Jesus Christ was really raised from the dead, if he really got up, was seen by hundreds of people, talked to them, you know what? Everything is going to be all right. Everything. Even your pain and your grief, and there's mystery to life. I don't have all the answers as to why you're going through what you're going through. What is it for you? What's that thing that comes to mind? I don't know necessarily why that's happening. And you might not know the rest of your life. Sometimes there's answers, sometimes you can see, okay, God was working in that, sometimes you won't. But the reality is, because he rose from the dead, because death is defeated, and because it proves he is who he said he was, everything will be all right. It will. It will. Don't let the hardness of hurt hearts, don't let it stop this truth sinking in right now by the Spirit of God. Everything will be all right. It will. There's a moment in my story, in my life, where I had kind of given up, to be honest, on life. And I really struggled with the idea of there being a purpose and a meaning. I was a Christian at the time. I just really couldn't see God in all the things that was happening in my life. And it got quite dark for a minute there, if I'm honest. And a really conscientious and worried friend took me to the GP to talk about it. And I had to do one of those forms. If you've been for a mental health thing, you've had to do this. It's like, 1 to 10, how sad are you? And how many times have you cried this week? And that kind of thing. And you're kind of trying to quantify this sense of hopelessness. It's a really weird experience. And then suddenly you're talking to the GP. And I really appreciate the pressure on our doctors, and I recognise they're doing their absolute best, but I don't think it's going to really help me. Because I said to him, I'm losing the plot. I can't see the point. I can't see the way through. I don't know why I should keep going. And he said a couple of things. He said one thing that was sort of helpful, which is okay. He said, okay, you might not see the point, but I'm sure your family and friends do. I'm sure they care. That's a good thing. We should say that to people. We should break people out of their own little kind of hurt bubbles into recognising their life is more than just of their own. And then he said to me, yeah, sure, cosmically speaking, in terms of the point of the world and of the universe, no, there's no point to your life. To a guy on the edge. I understand why it's funny. Let me tell you, it really wasn't. At the time, genuinely, it was gutting to me. It's like, that's what you've got to offer me? My friend's there like, what? What are you saying? What are you saying to this guy? It's like, I went out there, okay, genuinely, there's no point. There isn't anything. This is all meaningless. This is nothing. If Jesus isn't risen from the dead, in a resurrectionless world, that's all we've got. Just to try and grab for these kind of other purposes and meanings and hopes and truths and try and make our own and try and get it from people that love us and try and escape to things that can't really give us happiness and grab hold of things that aren't good for us. That's all we've got. Because ultimately there's nothing. Nothing. But if Jesus rose from the dead, everything will be all right. And that's my story. I'm a living, breathing testimony of the fact that I gave up, but Jesus did not give up on me. And I met him, and I kept going, and I kept getting out of bed when I didn't see the point, because he rose from the grave. Because I met him, because there's new life in him, because it changes everything. And I would pray prayers like, I don't want to live, but you are keeping me alive, and you rose from the dead, and so I'm going to get up today. Because there's a point. Because death is defeated and everything will be okay. It changed my life. It can change yours. Don't spend one moment longer not coming back to him, not trusting in him, not basking in that truth. Don't do it. Christian in the room, person who knows Jesus in the room, who you're under the weight of such pain, don't stop for a moment before you come back to Jesus. Do it now. Come back to him. I believe. I don't understand this thing, but I believe. I believe there's a point. I believe you rose from the dead. I believe you defeated the grave. Come back to him now. There's nothing like it. Nothing in the world will do what Jesus can do for you. Nothing. Nothing but he is. The Bible says Jesus rising from the dead wasn't just good for him. It means everything will be made new. Everything. This is a huge thing to unpack. We've got to skate over it here. It's glorious. It's a moment in the last book of the Bible where he who is seated on the throne, Jesus in Revelation 21 says, "Behold, I am making all things new." Jesus didn't just come to save individuals, but to make everything new. To our broken world with all of its pain and issues. Do you ache to see it made new? Don't you want it to be everything you know it should be? You will. One day you will. If you put your faith in Jesus and what the Bible says. Because he rose from the dead, everything will be alright. You can escape. You can escape from death. We heard it quoted already today. Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life. If you believe in me, those that believe in me, though they die, yet they shall live." You want to escape the inevitable march towards death that we're all doing? Put your faith in Jesus who defeated death. And it means that even if tomorrow is your last day, all that death can do is lead you to him. Lead you into that glory. Lead you into a place where death is just not a thing anymore, where it's lost its sting. Do you know, even if tomorrow is your worst day, all of your most awful nightmares come true, all that day can do, because of the power of Jesus in your life, is move you closer to glory. It's all it can do. You're 24 hours closer to being with him forever in the new heavens and the new earth. Revelation 21 also says this of Jesus: "He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more, and neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away." Every tear wiped away. Where is it for you this morning? Where do you need the resurrection of Jesus to speak hope into your life? Where do you need to hear him by his Spirit say to your heart, everything is going to be okay. It will. It will. Because we could be tempted to escape into all kinds of things. All kinds of things that are bad for us. Things that are all right but just end. To escape into these fantasy worlds, but the show ends and the book finishes and you flip over the last page and you're still where you were. We could be tempted to escape into lives that are not our own, to relationships with people that we're not married to, into substances and inebriation. Just kind of lets us escape for a little while. Just one more beer. It just helps me just not to think about it for a while, and then you wake up a bit hungover and still in the world that you tried to leave. There is no escape, not truly, not ultimately, from these things. There's nothing you can grab a hold of that's going to truly give you the hope that Jesus can give. You don't have to escape from reality. You need to escape to the ultimate reality of the victorious Jesus. That's what you need to do. That's what that's what my heart most needs this morning. Trust me, I've got my stuff, okay? I've got the things that I really need to hear Jesus say to my heart. It's okay, and so do you. So do you. And you can do that. You can come by faith. You can come and pray. You can come and know him again. As we sing together in a moment, as we take communion, you can come and taste of it. It's not just a hope for eternity, it's a hope for now. It's a kingdom that's not quite yet. Okay, we've not seen all of it. He's not come again. But he has defeated death. And you can taste of that healing. You can taste of that wholeness. You can taste of that resurrection right now. He's here by his Spirit. He can. He can do that for you. Don't hesitate. Come to him. I'll finish with the words of a song from the 1970s. Perhaps I can ask you even to close your eyes if you feel comfortable. I'm going to read this to us. I'm going to pray. This is a moment for you to engage with the risen Jesus. He is giving you all that you need for your trial, for your struggle, for the thing that you most desperately want him to help you with. Very simple words. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future and life is worth the living just because he lives. Father in heaven, I thank you so much for each person here, each person with eyes closed, each person